Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we're diving into a theme that strikes fear into anyone who has ever taken a long, lonely drive through the backroads of America. Road trip horror stories. There's something uniquely unsettling about the open highway at night. The endless stretches of asphalt, the flicker of headlights, the feeling that someone, or something, might be watching from the tree line. Out there, away from cities and comfort, you're more vulnerable than you realize. Countless travelers have spoken of strange figures appearing on the shoulder, phantom cars tailing them for miles, voices whispering through broken radios, and gas stations where the attendants never blink. In this video, you'll hear 10 disturbing true road trip horror stories that will make you think twice about your next late-night drive. Each one is told in first person, just like the terrifying experiences our community has shared, and every detail feels real enough to leave you staring into the dark outside your window tonight. So, dim the lights, settle in, and let's take this ride together. But remember, not everyone who sets out on a road trip makes it back home. If you enjoy these stories, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more chilling true horror. And as always, let us know in the comments if you've ever had your own terrifying encounter while traveling. I was 24 years old when this happened, back in the summer of 2020. I still remember the exact date because I had written it in a notebook I kept in my glove compartment. June 13th. I'd been driving cross-country from Oregon to Kansas to visit my parents after months of lockdowns and isolation. That night, I found myself on a stretch of highway in eastern Nevada, where the road seemed to stretch endlessly across a barren desert. I wasn't supposed to be out there so late. My original plan was to find a motel hours earlier, but everything in the tiny towns I passed was either booked or closed. I thought I could push through, maybe make it to a bigger city by dawn. The highway was empty. No cars ahead of me, no cars behind me, just darkness pressing against the edges of my headlights. At first, it was peaceful. The silence gave me space to think. I rolled the window down halfway, letting warm desert air mix with the coolness of night. The only sound was the steady hum of my tires. But that peace shattered when a pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. It was subtle at first, just a glow on the horizon. I figured it was another traveler catching up, maybe a trucker or someone like me pushing through the night. But as the minutes passed, the glow sharpened into 2 distinct orbs that clung to my rearview mirror like eyes. At first, I didn't think much of it. Highways draw company from time to time. But what unsettled me was that the car stayed at exactly the same distance behind me, 5 car lengths. Not closer, not further. I pressed the gas a little, testing them. My speedometer climbed from 70 to 75, then to 80. The headlights followed, matching me effortlessly. I slowed down, dropping to 65. They slowed too. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe they just like this pace. Maybe they didn't want to pass me at night in the dark. But deep down, my gut twisted with something else. Something primal. A fear that I was being measured, studied. I reached for the radio, hoping to drown my thoughts with static or a station, but all I got was faint white noise. It made the silence feel even heavier. After nearly 20 minutes of this, I tried a different tactic. I flicked my turn signal and took the next exit, a small ramp that led down to a desolate rest area surrounded by nothing but sagebrush. The headlights behind me followed. That was when the first drop of cold sweat slid down my temple. I pulled into the lot, my car crunching over gravel. The place was empty. No trucks, no cars, no vending machines glowing in the dark. Just a single dim lamp flickering above the cracked pavement. I parked near the edge and cut my headlights. The other car stopped too, about 50 feet back, keeping its lights on. I squinted through my rearview mirror, trying to make out the shape. It was a sedan, maybe gray or black, too far and too dark to read the plate. For a moment, we just sat there, me gripping my steering wheel, them idling with their engine humming faintly across the lot. My pulse hammered in my ears. I thought about stepping out, maybe confronting them, but the thought of leaving the safety of my locked doors made my stomach drop. Then I saw movement. The driver's door opened slightly, just a crack. I couldn't see a face, only the suggestion of a figure inside. They didn't step out. They just sat there with the door ajar, as if waiting for me to make the first move. That was enough. My fear turned into urgency. I twisted the key, engine roaring back to life, and sped out of the rest area, gravel spraying behind me. My tires screeched as I merged back onto the highway, and within seconds, the headlights were behind me again. I pressed harder on the gas, speeding into the night, every muscle in my body trembling with adrenaline. They followed, always at the same distance, as if tied to me by an invisible rope. By now, I was too terrified to rationalize. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't some random traveler. This was deliberate. For the next 30 minutes, I drove like that. Miles of black asphalt stretching endlessly, the desert silent around me, and those headlights trailing faithfully behind. I considered calling 911, but my phone screen glared back at me with the same mocking words. No service. I thought about stopping again, but the memory of that cracked open door burned into my brain. Whoever was behind me wanted me to stop, and I couldn't give them that. Finally, I spotted a green highway sign glowing faintly ahead. County Road 48. 2 miles. I didn't recognize the name, but I had an idea. If I could take a sharp turn and catch them off guard, maybe I could lose them. My heart thumped as I neared the exit. I flicked my blinker at the very last second, swerving onto the ramp. The headlights followed, but this time I floored it. The road was narrow, winding through rocky desert hills. Dust rose behind me in clouds as I pushed my car faster than I should have dared. My tires screamed around bends, my headlights bouncing over dips. I glanced back. The car followed, but further now, struggling to keep up in the tight curves. For a moment, hope flickered inside me. Maybe I could shake them. That was when the impossible happened. Midway around a sharp bend, the headlights vanished. 1 second they were there, glowing fiercely against the darkness. The next, they were gone. No gradual fade, no distant dimming. Just gone, as if they'd been snuffed out like a candle. I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop in the middle of the dirt road. My chest heaved, hands trembling against the wheel. I stared into the rearview mirror, praying to see nothing, and there was nothing. Only darkness stretching behind me, the desert silent and vast. I waited. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. My car idled, the only sound in that endless night, but the headlights never returned. I sat there for what felt like forever, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The night pressed in around me, the desert air still and suffocating. Part of me wanted to turn the car around and head back to the main highway, pretend none of this ever happened. But another part, the deeper, more instinctive part, told me not to move, not to let my guard down. Finally, with trembling hands, I shifted the car into gear and started forward again. The dirt road stretched endlessly into the dark, my headlights bouncing off jagged rocks and patches of scrub. Every twist and dip in the road made my heart jolt, certain I'd see those headlights appear again in my mirror. But mile after mile passed, and nothing followed. No car, no lights, no sound but the gravel crunching under my tires. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. Instead, the absence of those headlights felt worse, like the silence after a scream. Whoever they were, they hadn't just vanished. I couldn't believe that. They were out there somewhere, maybe waiting for me further ahead. After about 20 minutes of weaving through the back road, I finally reached an intersection with another highway. Relief washed over me when I saw the faded green sign, Route 93. I knew if I followed it north long enough, I'd reach Ely, a small town with motels, people, and light. Civilization. Safety. I turned onto the highway and pressed the gas, desperate to close the distance between myself and that empty desert. But just as I started to settle into the rhythm of the road again, I noticed something ahead. A glow. At first, I thought it was the faint lights of Ely, but no. This glow was too close, too sharp, two headlights shining directly toward me from a turnout just off the road. My stomach dropped. I slowed, squinting, and realized it was the same car, same shape, same distance of headlights, parked on the shoulder as if it had been waiting for me to arrive. My breath caught in my throat. There was no way they could have gotten here before me. I had taken random back roads at breakneck speed, and they had disappeared behind me. Yet here they were, waiting. I pressed harder on the accelerator, swerving wide to avoid them. As I passed, I tried not to look, but my eyes betrayed me. Through the windshield, I saw a figure sitting motionless in the driver's seat. Their head was turned toward me, face completely in shadow. They never moved, never flinched, just stared as I sped past into the night. For the next hour, I drove like a madman. Every set of headlights in the distance felt like them. Every shadow on the side of the road seemed to shift as if ready to leap into my lane. By the time I finally reached Ely, my nerves were so frayed I nearly ran a red light. I pulled into the first motel I saw, a peeling neon sign buzzing faintly above the lot. Inside, the clerk gave me a curious look as I fumbled with my wallet, hands shaking so badly I dropped my credit card twice. He asked if I was all right, but I just muttered something about being tired. In my room, I locked the door, drew the curtains tight, and sat on the bed in silence. My body was safe, but my mind kept racing. I couldn't stop picturing that car, those headlights, the shadowed figure watching from the side of the road. Sleep didn't come easily that night, and when it did, it came with dreams. Dreams of driving endlessly through the desert, headlights in my mirror no matter where I turned. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was over. I told myself it was just some strange coincidence, maybe a local who liked to mess with travelers. But when I stepped outside to load my car, I froze. There, in the far corner of the motel lot, sat a gray sedan, the same shape, the same dull color. I couldn't see the plate. I couldn't see if anyone was inside. I told myself it wasn't the same one, that it couldn't be. But as I stood there in the morning sun, luggage clutched in my hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone inside that car was watching me. I left Ely within minutes, driving straight to my parents' house in Kansas without stopping except for gas. I was 19 when this happened, just a year out of high school. It was late September 2016, and I had borrowed my older brother's car to take a weekend road trip from our small town in Montana down to Salt Lake City. It was my first time driving that far alone, and I was nervous but excited. Windows down, music on, feeling like an adult for the first time. The trip had been fine most of the way until the sun dipped below the horizon. That's when the roads emptied and the isolation set in. I had driven for nearly 3 hours without passing another vehicle. Just darkness pressing against the headlights, with the occasional flash of a reflective road sign to remind me I wasn't completely lost in a void. Around 11:30 p.m., I noticed the gas gauge sliding dangerously low. I hadn't been paying attention, and now the orange light glared at me like a warning I couldn't ignore. Panic bubbled in my chest as I scanned the sides of the road for any sign of fuel. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw a faded sign. Gas. 2 miles. I nearly sighed out loud with relief, gripping the wheel tighter as the car rolled forward on fumes. The station appeared out of nowhere, a small island of yellow light in the middle of pitch-black desert. It looked old, like it hadn't been renovated in decades. A single flickering fluorescent bulb lit the exterior, and 2 cracked pumps stood under a rusted canopy. The place was empty, save for 1 car parked on the far side. Its hood was dusty, like it hadn't moved in weeks. I pulled up to the pump and stepped out. The desert air was unnervingly still, not even a breeze to rustle the weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. The silence felt heavy, pressing against my ears. I reached for the nozzle, but nothing happened. The pump was dead. I cursed under my breath and looked toward the building. The convenience store's windows glowed faintly, though the neon open sign buzzed as if it were struggling to stay lit. Inside, a man stood behind the counter. He didn't move as I entered, didn't speak, just watched. He was middle-aged, maybe late 40s, with thinning dark hair and a sallow complexion. His eyes were wide, bloodshot at the edges, locked onto mine as soon as the bell above the door jingled. Hey, I muttered, forcing a polite smile. Pump's not working. Can I prepay or something? No answer. The man's eyes never blinked. He stood perfectly still, hands resting on the counter, his stare cutting into me so sharply I had to glance away. I cleared my throat, trying to shake the unease crawling up my spine. Just $20, please." His hand moved slowly, so slowly it felt deliberate, as he slid the register open. He pulled out an old metal key, his eyes never leaving mine, and handed it across the counter. His palm brushed against mine, cold and clammy. I tried to laugh it off. "Thanks, I'll, bring it back after." Still nothing, no nod. No smile, no blink. I backed out of the store, the bell above the door echoing too loud in the empty night. My footsteps on the cracked concrete sounded like gunshots. I hurried back to the pump, slid the key into the old switch, and finally the nozzle whirred to life. As I filled the tank, I forced myself not to look back at the building. But I couldn't help it. Through the glass, the man stood exactly where I left him, eyes wide and unblinking, his pale face glowing under the harsh fluorescent light. Watching, I nearly dropped the nozzle. The tank clicked full and I fumbled to return the pump. When I brought the key back inside, he didn't move to take it. His hand just stayed flat on the counter, palm up, as though he'd been waiting the whole time. I set the key in his palm and pulled my hand away quickly. His fingers closed around it with unnatural precision. Still no words. Still no blink. My chest tightened with dread. Something about him felt wrong, like I was standing too close to a mannequin pretending to be human. I muttered a shaky, "Thanks," and turned to leave. But just before I pushed through the door, I heard something. A whisper. So faint I thought it was my imagination. "Don't stay." I froze, hand still on the door handle. Slowly, I looked back. The man hadn't moved. His lips hadn't parted. His wide eyes still locked onto me, but I swear I heard it. A whisper that didn't match the stillness of his body. I stumbled outside, the bell above the door clanging behind me. My heart pounded so hard I felt sick. I rushed into the car, slammed the locks down, and started the engine. As I pulled out, my headlights swept across the dusty car parked in the corner. For the briefest moment I saw movement inside, like someone ducking their head down behind the seat. I pressed the gas harder than I should have, tires squealing as I tore out of the lot and back onto the highway. But when I checked the rearview mirror, I saw him. The gas station attendant stood outside now, framed in the doorway, his body rigid under the buzzing neon light. His face was aimed directly at me, eyes so wide they looked like 2 white orbs in the night. And even from that distance, I could tell. He still wasn't blinking. I drove for miles with my hands locked on the wheel, knuckles aching from the grip. The dark desert pressed in on all sides, and the only sound was the dull roar of the engine. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, certain I'd see headlights trailing me again. But the highway behind me remained empty. At first, that should have calmed me. But it didn't. It only made my chest tighten more, because the last image of him, standing motionless under that buzzing neon light, eyes wide, never blinking, stuck in my mind like a photograph I couldn't tear up. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just strange. Maybe he had a condition that kept him from blinking. Maybe he was mute or socially awkward or high on something. But none of those explanations sat right. Not with the way he whispered without moving his lips. Not with the way he seemed to know I shouldn't stay. The road stretched endlessly ahead, but I couldn't shake the sensation that I hadn't truly left that place. That somehow it had followed me. About an hour later, I spotted another glowing sign up ahead. Rest area. 1 mile. My legs ached, my bladder throbbed, and my brain screamed at me to stop. But when I pulled in, the dread hit me instantly. The lot was empty. No trucks, no cars. Just a dim row of overhead lamps casting sickly yellow light onto cracked pavement. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to just keep driving, but my body refused. I had to stretch. Had to breathe something other than the stale air of the car. I stepped out, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. Crickets chirped faintly in the brush. I stretched my arms, trying to shake off the tension. That's when I heard it. The faint jingle of a bell. My stomach lurched. It was the same sound from the gas station door. I spun, scanning the shadows, but there was nothing. Just the row of lamps buzzing faintly. I told myself I was imagining it. But as I turned back toward my car, my blood turned to ice. The dusty sedan from the gas station was parked 2 rows down. I knew it was the same one. Same dull color. Same shape. Its hood gleamed faintly under the lamplight, though I could have sworn it hadn't been there when I pulled in. I froze, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The driver's seat was empty, or at least it looked empty. I rushed back into my car, slammed the locks down, and started the engine. My headlights cut across the lot, sweeping past the sedan. For the briefest moment, I saw something. A figure hunched in the back seat, head tilted at an unnatural angle, eyes wide and glowing in the beam of my lights. I screamed and tore out of the lot, tires screeching against asphalt. The highway blurred past as I pushed the car to its limits. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just drove, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever I'd seen. But 20 minutes later, I glanced at my fuel gauge, and my heart sank. The needle was dropping fast. Too fast. I had filled the tank back at the station. I should have had enough gas to make it to the next city. But the gauge slid lower and lower, as if something was draining the fuel from inside. No, 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 I muttered, hands shaking on the wheel. The engine sputtered. My car jerked, and then, with a sickening cough, it died. I coasted to a stop on the side of the highway, surrounded by endless desert. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. I tried my phone, still no service. I thought about stepping out, but the memory of that hunched figure in the sedan froze me in place. Then, faintly, I heard it again. The jingle of a bell. My blood ran cold. I turned slowly toward the rearview mirror. In the reflection, illuminated by the faint moonlight, stood the gas station attendant. He was behind my car, his wide eyes fixed directly on mine through the glass. His face was pale, expressionless, and unblinking. I whipped around, heart hammering, but the road was empty. Nothing there. When I looked back at the mirror, he was gone. I sat there all night, locked in my dead car, praying for daylight. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the desert horizon, I was half delirious with exhaustion. A passing trucker finally stopped and gave me a lift into the next town. When I told him what happened, he just gave me a long, strange look. Then he said something I'll never forget. That station, it burned down back in the 90s. Hasn't been opened since. My skin prickled, a cold sweat breaking across my forehead. To this day, I don't know who or what I saw that night. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see him, standing under buzzing neon light, wide-eyed, unblinking, and always watching. I was 22 when this happened, back in the fall of 2018. At the time, I was a college student in Northern California, trying to save money by driving home to visit my parents instead of flying. The trip was long, close to 10 hours on the road, and I usually broke it into 2 days. But that weekend, I made the mistake of leaving later than planned, determined to push through in one night. By the time I crossed into the Nevada desert, it was after midnight. The highway was nearly empty, and the world around me seemed swallowed in silence. My headlights carved a narrow path through the darkness, illuminating nothing but asphalt and the occasional sign warning of deer crossings. That's when I saw him, a figure standing on the shoulder, thumb out, illuminated briefly by my headlights. He looked young, maybe in his early 20s, wearing a faded hoodie and jeans. His posture was slouched, as though exhaustion had sunk into his bones. Normally, I would have driven right past. My parents had drilled it into me never to pick up hitchhikers. But something about the way he stood there, the loneliness of the road stretching endlessly behind him. I slowed down before I could stop myself. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled onto the shoulder. The young man approached quickly, his steps purposeful but oddly quiet. He opened the back passenger door without asking and slid inside. "Thanks," he said softly. His voice was low, flat, almost rehearsed. I glanced at him through the rear-view mirror. He avoided my gaze, staring out the side window as though the desert held something more interesting than me. "No problem," I muttered. "Where you headed?" He hesitated before answering. "Just up the road. A few miles, that was all. No explanation, no story about where he'd been or where he was going. Just those few words. I tried to focus on the road, but unease coiled in my stomach. Something about him felt wrong. His stillness was unnatural. He didn't shift, didn't fidget. Just sat there, rigid, like a shadow given form. I told myself I was overreacting. People hitch rides all the time. But when I checked the mirror again, my chest tightened. His face was partially obscured by the hood, but I could see his eyes in the glass. They weren't watching the road. They were watching me. I cleared my throat, desperate to break the tension. "So, what's your name?" No answer. I glanced back quickly. His lips hadn't moved. His gaze shifted back to the window. The silence grew unbearable. My palms sweated against the steering wheel, every nerve in my body screaming that something was wrong. But I couldn't just throw him out into the desert. I told myself to wait a few more miles, drop him off, and forget it ever happened. After about 10 minutes, I decided it was time. "This far enough?" I asked. He didn't respond. "Hey, this good for you?" I pressed. Still nothing. I checked the mirror again. The back seat was empty. My breath caught in my throat. I slammed on the brakes, my car screeching to a stop in the middle of the empty highway. My heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out. The passenger door hadn't opened. The locks were still down. The seatbelt buckle lay untouched. But he was gone. I twisted around fully, staring into the back seat, my headlights casting long shadows across the fabric. Empty. Completely empty. The desert stretched silent around me. No sign of movement. No figure walking away down the road. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, hands trembling, before finally forcing myself to drive again. But the worst part came later, because when I finally pulled into a rest stop an hour down the road, I noticed something chilling. On the back seat where he had been sitting, the cushion was still indented, as if someone had never left. I sat at that rest stop for nearly half an hour, my car idling, hands locked on the steering wheel. Every instinct told me to leave, to keep moving until I reached the safety of my parents' driveway. But another part of me, some dark, heavy part, couldn't stop staring at the indentation in the back seat. It was shallow, as if someone had leaned against the cushion only moments earlier. No matter how many times I blinked, it didn't smooth out, didn't fade. My rational brain screamed at me, fabric springs back. Seats don't hold shape forever. But it stayed there, mocking me. Finally, I forced myself back onto the highway. My headlights cut through the dark, the road stretching endlessly ahead. I told myself over and over, you imagined it. Stress, fatigue, nothing more. But then the smell hit me. At first, faint, like old sweat, damp clothes left too long in the trunk. Then stronger, sour, metallic. The smell of rust and decay. I gagged, rolling the window down, but it didn't help. It was coming from inside the car. From the back seat, my heart thundered. I glanced at the mirror. The indentation was deeper now, like something unseen was leaning heavier into it. I slammed the brakes, heart pounding, and twisted around. The seat was empty, but the smell clung to the air, and for a split second, I thought I saw the faint outline of a shape, slouched in the shadows, before it dissolved in the blink of an eye. Get out, I whispered to myself. Just get out. But I couldn't. The thought of stepping into the dark desert, alone and vulnerable, felt worse than whatever was in that car. I pressed on. For miles, the smell followed. Stronger, heavier, like rot pressing against my lungs. And then came the whispers. At first, so faint I thought it was the wind hissing through a crack. But they grew louder, insistent. A voice, low, monotone, repeating words I couldn't understand. Not English. Not anything I recognized. I covered my ears, but the whispers weren't outside. They were inside my head, vibrating against my skull. By the time I reached the lights of another gas station, I was half delirious with fear. I swerved into the lot, stumbled out, and gulped the night air like I'd been drowning. The smell vanished instantly. The whispers silenced. I stood there trembling, staring at my car. It sat there innocently under the buzzing fluorescent lights. Nothing visibly wrong. Just a beat-up sedan with an empty back seat. But I couldn't bring myself to get back in. Not yet. The station attendant, a heavy-set man with a weathered face, stepped outside to smoke. He gave me a curious look and asked if I was all right. I picked up a hitchhiker, I stammered, but he vanished, just disappeared. The man's expression hardened. He took a drag from his cigarette, eyes narrowing like he'd heard this before. Was it on Highway 50? He asked quietly. My stomach dropped. Yeah, how did you... He shook his head, cutting me off. Son, you don't pick them up. Not out there. What do you mean? His eyes flicked toward the desert beyond the lights. His voice lowered. Been stories for years. Folks out there waving rides. Some say they died in crashes decades back. Others say they're something else. But once they get in your car, they don't always leave. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I wanted to press him for details, but fear rooted me to the pavement. Finally, I gathered enough courage to ask, "What do I do now?" He flicked the cigarette into the dirt, grinding it under his boot. "Get back in. Keep driving. Don't look back. Don't answer if it talks again." His tone was flat, final, like advice carved in stone. I didn't want to follow it, but I didn't have another choice. With shaking hands, I opened the driver's door and slid inside. The smell was gone. The seat looked normal. The whispers had fallen silent. For the next 3 hours, I drove without stopping, my eyes fixed on the horizon, knuckles aching against the wheel. Every bump in the road made me flinch. Every shadow in the mirror made my stomach knot. By the time I reached my parents' house, dawn had begun to break. The pale light of morning felt like salvation. I parked in the driveway, stumbled inside, and collapsed on the couch without even unpacking. When I woke later that afternoon, my mom asked why I'd left my brother's car door wide open all night. My blood ran cold. "I didn't," I said. But when I stepped outside, there it was. The back passenger door swung wide, and on the seat cushion, clear as day, was the indentation, deeper than before, like someone had been sitting there all night. I was 26 when this happened, in the summer of 2017. I'd been driving cross-country for a new job, hauling most of my belongings in the back of my beat-up hatchback. By the time I hit the backroads of Nebraska, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. The highway stretched on endlessly, flat fields on both sides, no towns in sight. I told myself I'd stop at the first motel I could find, no matter how run down. And eventually, just past midnight, I saw one. A faded neon sign buzzing weakly above a squat, single-story building. "Rest Easy Motel," it read, though the glow of the letters flickered so badly the words looked fractured. The lot was nearly empty, just a couple of cars parked near the far edge. The office light glowed faintly, and behind the counter stood a man. He looked to be in his late 30s with thinning blonde hair and pale skin that almost matched the yellow tint of the fluorescent bulbs overhead. I dragged myself inside, the bell above the door jangling weakly. The clerk's eyes met mine immediately. His smile stretched too wide, lingering on his face a second too long. "Late night," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "Yeah," I muttered, sliding my ID across the counter. "Just need a room for the night." He scanned my license, his eyes flicking between me and the plastic card with unnerving slowness. Finally, he slid a key across the counter. An actual metal key attached to a cracked plastic tag with faded numbers. "Room 6, he said. His hand lingered a moment too long on mine as he passed it over. Cold, clammy skin, like he hadn't been outside in weeks. I muttered thanks and hurried back out, eager to collapse into bed. Room 6 was near the middle of the building, the paint peeling around the door frame. Inside, the room was as shabby as expected. Stained carpet, sagging mattress, buzzing lamp. But, at that point, I didn't care. I locked the door, dropped my bag, and sank into the bed. Sleep came quickly. But I woke sometime after 2 a.m. to the sound of the phone ringing. Groggy, I reached for the receiver on the nightstand. "Hello?" "Nothing, just silence. Hello?" I tried again, irritation edging into my voice. I thought I heard something faint, a breath maybe, but no words. I hung up and flopped back against the pillow, telling myself it was probably a wrong number. 15 minutes later, the phone rang again. My chest tightened this time as I answered. "Hello?" Again, silence. But the line wasn't dead. I could hear faint static, the almost imperceptible sound of someone breathing on the other end. I slammed the receiver down, pulse racing. By the third call, I didn't answer. The shrill ringing filled the room, echoing off the thin walls until I yanked the cord out of the wall completely. Finally, silence. I lay back, forcing my breathing to slow. The room felt heavier now, the air thick with something I couldn't name. I told myself it was just a prank. Maybe the clerk was bored, messing with the only guest he had. But when I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, I woke again an hour later, this time to the sound of footsteps outside my door. Slow, deliberate, one step, then another. They stopped directly in front of my room. I held my breath, eyes locked on the shadow moving under the crack of the door. The light outside cast it long and thin across the carpet. It didn't move, just stood there. Minutes passed. My body screamed for me to do something, but fear pinned me in place. Finally, the shadow shifted, and the footsteps moved away. When I dared to peek through the curtain, the lot was empty. Not a soul in sight. I told myself it had to be another guest. Maybe someone smoking, pacing outside. But when I looked again, my stomach dropped. The clerk stood at the far end of the lot, illuminated faintly by the neon sign. His head was tilted slightly, his pale face aimed directly at my window. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering so loud I was sure it echoed through the thin walls. The sight of him standing under that failing neon sign felt wrong, like he wasn't just a man but some figure carved out of the night itself. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe my overtired brain was twisting shadows into faces. But deep down I knew. The pale skin, the way his head tilted just slightly, it was the same man who had handed me the key with that too-wide smile. I double-checked the locks on the door, then shoved the dresser against it for good measure. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the lamp when I tried to unplug it, hoping darkness might make me less of a target. But the shadows in that room only deepened, stretching into corners where anything could be hiding. I curled onto the bed, fully clothed, heart racing. Sleep didn't come. Sometime around 3:30 a.m., the phone rang again. I froze. I had unplugged it hours earlier. My eyes darted to the nightstand. The cord still hung loose, disconnected. But the receiver buzzed and rang with shrill insistence. Slowly, I reached for it. My hand trembled as I lifted the receiver to my ear. Static, then breathing, and then, clear this time, a whisper. "You shouldn't have stayed." I dropped the phone, my whole body jolting. The receiver swung on its cord, knocking against the nightstand with dull thuds. Before I could move, the footsteps returned, slower this time. Deliberate, crunching against the thin carpet outside my door. They stopped directly in front of room 6. The shadow under the door stretched long, filling the floor at my feet, and then the handle rattled. Not subtle. Not testing, but twisting hard, shaking against the lock I'd secured earlier. I pressed my back to the headboard, eyes wide, breath ragged. The dresser groaned against the pressure. Whoever was on the other side wanted in. Badly. I grabbed my phone. Still no service. The glowing no signal at the top mocked me. After what felt like hours, but must have only been a minute, the rattling stopped. Silence settled in, thick and suffocating. I thought maybe it was over. But then, faintly, I heard it. The click of another door opening. Then another. Then another. I crept to the peephole, my eye pressed to the scratched glass. My blood turned to ice. Every single door along the motel row stood wide open. Except mine, and at the far end of the lot, under that buzzing neon sign, the clerk stood once again. His head tilted back now, staring not at my window but at the black sky above, mouth open as though silently screaming. That was it. I couldn't stay another second. I shoved the dresser aside, grabbed my bag, and bolted out the door. The humid night air hit me like a wall, but I didn't slow. My keys shook in my grip as I sprinted to my car. Behind me, I swore I heard doors slamming shut one by one, in perfect rhythm with my pounding feet. I threw myself inside, started the engine, and tore out of the lot, gravel spraying behind me. In the rearview mirror, the neon sign flickered violently until it went dark completely, swallowing the motel in shadow. I didn't stop driving until dawn. By then, I had no idea where I was, just grateful to see the sun bleeding over the horizon. Later that day, when I finally reached a bigger town, I stopped at a diner for coffee. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, asked where I'd come from. I mentioned the Rest Easy Motel. She froze, coffee pot hovering midair. "That place?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, off Highway 34. Neon sign." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That place burned down years ago. Clerk was inside when it happened. Folks say he never left." The mug in my hand trembled, hot liquid sloshing over the rim. I left the diner without finishing the coffee, and I never, ever stayed in roadside motels again. But sometimes, late at night when my phone rings, I still hear nothing but breathing on the other end. I was 27 when this happened in late October of 2019, driving east from Colorado back to my hometown in Missouri. I had loaded the hatch with a few plastic tubs from my short-term rental, winter clothes, a box of kitchen stuff, a dented toolbox, and told myself I could beat the storm the radio kept warning about. By dusk, I had already been on the road 8 hours. By midnight, I had convinced myself I could make the whole 12 in one push. It felt like a dare I made against the dark. Past Lyman, the interstate narrowed, the sky sank lower, and the exits thinned to lonely numbers that didn't promise much. The world outside my windshield was a tunnel of white dashes and blacktop. The heater blew too hot on my feet and too cold on my hands. I kept the volume low because loud music felt like a mistake when the night was listening. It was a few minutes. After 2, when I noticed the hazard lights ahead, small orange blinks on the right shoulder, pulsing slow like a heartbeat. A stranded car, I thought, and eased off the gas, ready to slide left and give the driver a wide berth. But as I drew closer, something inside me leaned forward the way you lean toward a mirror that doesn't feel honest. Same body, same color, same missing hubcap on the back driver's side I'd been meaning to replace for a year. I swallowed and told myself, overlap happens. Lots of folks drive this model. Then my beams rolled over the rear bumper and found the crescent-shaped scrape I'd put there with a parking post 2 springs ago. The paint on the scratch looked wet because of the frost. The shape was mine. I coasted. I shouldn't have, but I did. My hands floated a little off the wheel the way they do when your mind refuses to own what your eyes just signed for. I passed slow enough to see into the cabin. On the passenger seat lay a sun-bleached backpack with a frayed strap. Mine. In the center console, an old metal water bottle with a dent in the side like a thumbprint. Mine. A brown canvas jacket folded on the rear seat with a rip at the cuff that I kept promising to stitch. Mine. And in the driver's seat sat a shape with my shoulders under my same cheap fleece. Face turned slightly toward the glass. Not quite lit by my headlights, not quite hidden. Pale. Expressionless. Watching. I accelerated so hard the engine protested. The shoulder blurred and the hazy orange blink fell behind like a buoy on black water. The road bent left and swallowed the scene, but the shape of it stayed inside me. A second horizon. For a mile, I didn't breathe. For another mile, I tried to turn the memory into a trick of fatigue, the way tired eyes build faces out of mailboxes and fence posts. I told myself I'd pulled a long week, that the desert does things to depth perception. Then I reached for the water bottle in my console and closed my hand on empty plastic. The ring of condensation remained, a dark halo on the rubber insert, but the bottle was gone. I checked the passenger seat without meaning to. The backpack wasn't there. My chest tightened like a belt cinched a notch too far. At the next blue sign promising gas in 1 mile, I flicked my blinker and took the exit too fast. The station was the kind that lives on in every town. The fluorescent island with moths orbiting it, the tinny chime on the door, The coffee that tastes like it remembers other lives. The lot was empty. Inside, a bored night clerk in a baseball cap watched a game on a phone propped against the lottery machine. I bought gas and stood under the awning listening to the pump click, telling myself to breathe normally so I wouldn't make strangers out of my own lungs. When the tank filled, I opened the rear door to check the jacket. Gone. The space where it should have been showed flattened carpet, a rectangle of darker nap like a shadow that had soaked in. I ran my hand over the spot and felt cold fabric that wasn't there. "Long night?" the clerk asked when I went back inside for a cup of coffee I didn't want. "Just trying to make miles," I said. My voice sounded like it came from the tile and not from me. "You got weather rolling over the plains," he said without looking up. "Stay on the interstate. Folks get clever on farm roads and end up somewhere they didn't mean to." Back at the car, I sat for a full minute with the engine idling, watching the glass doors of the store reflect my headlights. The reflection showed my car where it was supposed to be, my face where it was supposed to be, my hands on a wheel I recognized. It steadied me just enough to put the shifter in drive. The plains reclaimed me in one long, dark breath. Mile markers ticked like a metronome. The coffee went cold, untouched. I kept telling myself sunrise wasn't far, 4 hours, maybe 5. I made plans about oil changes and laundry and which box I'd unpack first to keep my brain moving forward. 20 miles out, the world thinned again, the interstate lifting on a shallow rise that gave me more sky than I wanted. That was when I saw the next set of hazards on the shoulder, farther ahead this time, small and patient. I said out loud without meaning to, "No." The word didn't leave vapor in the cabin. It stayed in my mouth. I didn't slow. I locked my arms and passed at highway speed without looking. But peripheral vision is a thief. It takes what you refuse to hand it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my own profile lit by my own beams. The mouth turned slightly, as if mid-word. The eyes glancing at me, not through me. A mirror tilted wrong. The lane widened. The shoulder fell away. I told myself to count to 100 and then check the mirrors. I lasted to 63. When I looked back, there was only empty asphalt and a seam of frost glittering in the high beams of no one. The heater made a small clacking sound like a coin trapped in a vent, and for the first time all night, I thought about voices. Who would I call? What would I say? There's another me on the shoulder and he has my jacket? I pictured my mother's practical concern, my father's tired advice to pull over and nap. I pictured myself explaining to a state trooper why I had stopped on a live lane to stare at my own face in a dead car. I kept driving. At the next rest area, I signaled and took the ramp without remembering deciding to. The lot sat empty except for one semi idling with its curtains drawn. The windsock on the pole hung lifeless. I parked under a light and turned. The engine off so I could hear the world decide what to do with me. Silence. Then the tick of cooling metal. Far off, a train that might have been thunder. I stepped out, then back in, then out again, embarrassed in front of no one. The air smelled like cold iron and damp cardboard. I opened the rear door just to prove a point to myself and found nothing where a jacket should be. I closed it gently, as if I might wake something. Back behind the wheel, I told myself one last sensible story. The planes play tricks. The mind copies itself when it doesn't want to be alone. Tired people misplace things. I promised the steering wheel I would not stop again until daylight. I didn't see the text until I merged back onto the interstate. One bar of service snagged and lost in the same second. The notification flashed and slid away before I could tap it. For a moment, the screen showed a preview I could read even while I told myself not to. You left something behind. I merged back up to cruising speed with that preview glowing behind my eyelids. You left something behind. The message itself was gone when I opened the thread. No number, no history, only the ghost of notification in my nerves. My palms felt damp against the wheel. The interstate unspooled like tape, and I kept expecting to hear my own voice recorded over it. 15 minutes later, a new light flickered at the road's edge. Hazard lights again. The same slow pulse. I didn't want to look, but denial has poor eyesight. It bumps into what it avoids. The car on the shoulder matched mine like a reflection pressed out of glass. Same scrape, same missing hubcap, same shallow dent on the trunk lid where a box had slipped months earlier. I told myself to keep my lane. I told myself to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth like the internet says. I passed with my eyes locked forward. Even so, periphery stole a frame, my profile in the driver's seat turning slightly as if to listen. The mouth almost smiled. I counted mile markers. I whispered their numbers so I'd have a tether to this version of the road. At marker 288, the shoulder fell away and a sound rose in the cabin. Soft at first, then clearer, fabric shifting, a weight settling. I looked at the passenger seat. The backpack sat there now, strap frayed, zipper half open as if it had been dropped from a small height. My throat went tight. Moisture beaded on the metal water bottle in the console that had been empty an hour ago. The next rest area appeared like a mercy. I told myself I'd stop only long enough to rinse my face, to shake the tremor out of my hands. The lot was almost full. 2 semis idled, a pickup slept nose into a tree, a family SUV hunched with its windows fogged. Company should have calmed me. It didn't. I parked under a lamp and sat still until the engine's ticking slowed. When I finally got out, the cold knifed through my sweatshirt. The night smelled like diesel in winter. In the bathroom's harsh light, I looked like a copy of myself smudged by a bad printer, overexposed under the eyes, mouth set wrong. I splashed water and returned to the car, feeling steadier in the lie that people give one another safety by existing nearby. The driver's door was unlocked. I was certain I had locked it. On the passenger seat, the backpack sat open. Inside, items had been rearranged the way strangers rearrange your things when they convince themselves they're putting them back. My paperback lay on top, but not the way I leave books, spine up, protective. It lay face down and splayed as if someone had pressed their palm flat in the center. The page held a dull, sandy smear like a thumbprint made of road dust. I zipped the bag and put it in the rear footwell. "Enough," I said. "Enough." The sound had edges. Back on the interstate, the snow finally began. A dry, thin sift, more suggestion than weather, but it changed the world to one surface. The hazard lights ahead looked farther away until, without me remembering the in-between, they were beside my window. I didn't see the other me this time. I saw the jacket, my jacket, hung over the passenger seat headrest of the stopped car, sleeve swaying slightly though no wind moved. As I passed, the sleeve lifted higher, and for a second I saw the cuff tear I meant to fix open like a mouth. I took the next exit without reading what town it promised. The ramp curled under the highway and spat me onto a 2-lane that threaded black fields. Distance changed shape out here. Houses were either very close or so far away they belonged to another year. I drove until the road narrowed to a single rough strip with gravel shoulders. My headlights found the sign too late. Road closed ahead. I kept going because turning around meant admitting I was lost with myself. The closure came as a set of barricades and a crane sleeping over a culvert. I stopped, hands finally leaving the wheel because I needed them for proof that the world still had touch in it. Snow ticked against the glass. The phone woke on its own and the screen filled with my face. Front camera, unbidden. For a heartbeat I thought it had mirrored and I was seeing the me in the other car, but my version moved a half-second behind the one on the glass, as if he anticipated, and I chased. The image flickered and a text covered it. Trade? I don't know how long I sat there, engine idling, breath fogging a small circle on the windshield. Another set of lights rose on the road behind me. No hurry, no rush, just the patient float of a vehicle that knows a destination you don't. I checked the mirror. The lights were my lights. The car behind me was my car. It parked at the barricade beside mine, nose to nose, bumper kissing bumper so gently the touch barely registered. Through the other windshield I saw me looking back. Not pale now, but vivid, like someone who had slept well and made peace with distance. The face wore my shape, and also a margin of my face that belonged more correctly to the night around it. I put the car in reverse and felt the bump of bumper against bumper, soft, resisting. I tried again and the resistance held. In the other car, my double smiled the way I had seen before. Not unkind, not kind, a practiced expression someone might wear to avoid frightening a stranger. He leaned forward and his lips moved. I couldn't hear the words through two windshields and my own fear, but I thought I saw shapes like left, walk, as if a voice were teaching me something I used to know. I killed the engine, opened the door, and stepped into a snow that didn't feel cold. The night pressed closer with the smell of antifreeze and cut hay. To the left of the barricades, a narrow path led down into the ditch where the culvert lay half-ripped. My boot slid and filled with icy water that I didn't feel until later. Behind me, my own idling rose, though I had turned the key off. I made it halfway down before I understood I wasn't alone on the slope. Footprints already patterned the thin snow, a single line of mine coming down and a single line of mine going back up, each step inside the other. I stood there with one hand on the cold rail and counted them until counting lost meaning. "Stop," I said, but the request had no address. When I climbed back to the road, the other car was gone. No taillights, no tracks, no sound. My bumper showed no scuff even where I had felt the touch. I got in and started the engine, though I never remember turning the key, and drove back toward the interstate by a route I couldn't describe now if you paid me. Inside, my mother hugged me and said I felt like I'd been standing outside. My father asked if the roads were bad. I told them I was tired and carried in one tub of clothes to prove I belonged to the tasks of this world. When I went back for the jacket to hang it by the door, it wasn't in the rear seat. It was already on the hook inside, sleeves damp with the snow I hadn't brought in. At night, when I drive home from the late shift and the highway shoulder glints with frost, I sometimes see a parked car with its hazards winking like a heartbeat. I don't slow anymore. I keep my eyes on the road and my hands where I can see them. Still, somewhere out there without me, another me keeps perfect watch. And when the phone lights my face from the dash, I never look down long enough to read what he sends.